They said she wasn't
Mama,
worth a
are these
ticket,
letters for
but by
us?
sundown,
I
she
see
would be
one.
the only
Yes, my
reason two
darlings,
children
these are
spoke
from your
again.
father.
Before we continue,
Wow.
tell me,
Can you read
where are you
them,
watching
Mom?
from? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if you believe in justice that rides silent, hit like and follow. Now back to the story. The train
Mama,
door
are
slammed
these letters
shut with
for
a
us?
hollow, final
I see
sound that
one.
echoed
Yes, my
across the
darlings,
small wooden
these are from your
platform.
father.
And Clara Whitmore's hand
Wow.
lingered
Can
in
you
the air
read
where the
them,
handle
Mom?
had been just seconds ago, her fingers trembling not from the cold, but from the weight of every eye now fixed on her back, judging, deciding, dismissing. The conductor didn't look at her again. He had already moved on. In towns like this, people didn't need proof. They only needed a story they liked better than the truth. A gust of dry wind swept across the tracks, carrying dust that clung to her dress, to her hair, to the worn leather suitcase at her feet. The same suitcase no one had offered to help with, the same one a woman had pulled her child away from, as if it carried something contagious. Clara didn't argue. She hadn't argued for miles. Not when the whispers started. Not when the ticket was questioned. Not even when the word trouble was spoken loud enough for everyone to hear. Because out here, explanations didn't clear your name. They only made people listen harder to the lie. The train began to move, iron wheels grinding against steel, slow at first, then faster, carrying away the last chance she had to disappear into somewhere new, somewhere she wasn't already known for something she hadn't done. Clara lowered her hand slowly, her shoulders still, her face calm in a way that comes only after you've run out of ways to fight back. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the departing train and the distant creak of wood from the empty station building. Then hoofbeats. Not rushed, not cautious, just steady, like the land itself had decided to speak. Clara didn't turn right away. She had learned that looking up too quickly only invited more disappointment. But the sound stopped just a few feet behind her, close enough that she could hear the quiet shift of leather, the soft exhale of a horse. My children need you. The voice was low, even, without hesitation. Not a question, not a favor. Clara turned then, slowly, her eyes meeting those of a man who didn't look at her the way the others had. Ethan Caldwell sat tall in the saddle, hat casting a shadow across a face marked by sun and time, but not by doubt. He didn't ask who she was, didn't ask what happened. His gaze held none of the suspicion she had come to expect, only something quieter, something heavier. Trust. Clara blinked, just once, as if the word itself had been spoken aloud, and she wasn't sure she remembered what it meant. You don't even know me, she said, her voice steady but softer than she intended. Ethan's eyes didn't move. I know what it looks like when someone gets left behind, he replied. A pause. The wind shifted. Somewhere far off, a loose shutter tapped against wood. Clara glanced back at the tracks, now empty, then down at her suitcase, then back at the man who had just offered her something no one else had all day. Not help, not pity, but a place. And out here, that meant more than anything money could buy. Clara did not answer right away because answers had cost her too much already, and trust had become something people asked for only to take something in return. Yet Ethan Caldwell did not reach for her suitcase, did not step closer, did not rush the silence. He simply waited the way a man waits for weather to pass, knowing it cannot be forced, and that patience is sometimes the only kind of kindness left in the world. The horse shifted under him, leather creaking softly, and somewhere beyond the empty tracks a crow called once and went quiet again. Clara drew a slow breath, her eyes tracing the dust where the train had disappeared as if it might come back and undo everything. But it did not. It never did, and she knew that better than anyone. What do they need? She asked finally, her voice carrying a careful distance, not cold, just guarded, like someone who had learned to measure every word before letting it go. Ethan tilted his head slightly, considering her not as a stranger, but as someone already part of the answer he had been searching for. They need someone who does not look at them like they are broken, he said, simple as that. No embellishment, no attempt to convince, just the truth laid bare between them like open ground. Clara felt something tighten in her chest at the words, not pain, not exactly, but recognition, the kind that comes when someone names a feeling you have been carrying alone. She glanced down at her suitcase again, the worn edges, the handle shaped by years of being held onto through too many departures, too many places that had not wanted her to stay. Inside were things people misunderstood, things that had already cost her more than one chance at a new life. And yet, this man had not asked to see any of it, had not demanded proof of anything. As if whatever she carried did not matter as much as what she could give, the wind shifted again, lifting a strand of her hair across her cheek, and for a moment she closed her eyes. Just for a second, long enough to feel the weight of standing still when everything in her life had been movement, running, leaving, surviving. And when she opened them, Ethan was still there, unchanged, steady, like a fence post that had weathered too many storms to be moved by one more. "And if I cannot help them?" she asked, not because she believed she could not, but because she needed to know what failure would cost this time. Ethan's gaze softened just a fraction, enough to show something human beneath the quiet strength. "Then you tried," he said, and there was no disappointment in it, no warning, no hidden consequence, just acceptance, the kind that did not need to be earned. Clara let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding, and something inside her, something small and stubborn, shifted, not fully, not yet, but enough. She reached down and picked up her suitcase, the weight familiar in her hand, but somehow different now. As if for the first time it was not something she carried alone, she stepped toward the horse, stopping just short of the stirrup, her eyes lifting to meet his once more, searching for doubt, for hesitation, for anything that would make this moment make sense in the world she knew. But there was none, only that same quiet certainty. And in a place where she had just been told she was worth nothing, that certainty felt louder than any accusation. "All right," she said, barely above a whisper, but it was enough. Ethan nodded once, as if that was all he had ever needed to hear, and without another word, he shifted in the saddle and extended a hand, not to pull her up, not to lead, but simply to offer balance. Clara hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his, and together, without looking back at the station that had already forgotten her, they turned toward a road that did not promise anything, except that this time, she was not being sent away. The road stretched out in front of them like a question neither of them was in a hurry to answer, dust rising in soft clouds beneath the horse's steady rhythm. And Clara Whitmore sat behind Ethan Caldwell with her hands resting lightly against the worn leather saddle, careful not to hold on too tightly, as if even balance had to be negotiated now. The sun drifting lower across the open land, turning everything gold and quiet, miles passing without a single word between them. But it was not the kind of silence she had known at the station, not sharp, not accusing. This one felt patient, like it was waiting for something to arrive on its own. Clara's eyes moved across the horizon, taking in the emptiness that somehow felt more honest than the crowded platform she had left behind. No whispers out here. No sideways glances, just wind, earth, and the sound of a man who did not ask questions he did not need answered. She studied Ethan from where she sat, the way he rode without urgency, the way his shoulders stayed loose but ready, like someone who had learned long ago that control did not come from force, but from knowing when not to use it. And it unsettled her more than suspicion ever had, because distrust she understood, distrust she could survive, but this quiet belief, this unspoken acceptance, it pressed against something inside her she had been trying to keep closed. "You always bring strangers home like this?" she asked finally, her voice breaking through the rhythm of hooves and wind. Ethan did not turn his head, did not seem surprised that she had spoken at all. "No," he said simply. Then after a moment, "Just the ones who stay after they are told to leave." Clara frowned slightly at that, the words settling deeper than she expected. She looked down at her hands, at the faint dust gathering along her gloves, and for a moment she saw herself the way the town had seen her, someone pushed aside, someone unwanted, someone easier to judge than to understand. But then she remembered the way he had looked at her, not past her, not through her, but at her, as if there was something there worth seeing, something worth trusting, and that thought made her uneasy in a way she could not quite name. The ranch came into view slowly, not grand, not impressive, just a small house set against open land, a fence line worn by time, a barn that had seen better years, and something about it felt real, not polished, not pretending, just a place that had endured. Ethan slowed the horse as they approached, the sound of hooves softening against the packed dirt, and Clara felt it before she saw it. That same kind of silence she had noticed earlier, but heavier now, closer, like the air itself was holding its breath. Two small figures sat on the wooden porch, side by side, still as if they had been carved into the boards, their faces turned toward the horizon, not toward the road, not toward the sound of someone arriving, just waiting for something that never seemed to come. Ethan dismounted first, his boots hitting the ground with a quiet thud, and for the first time since they had met, there was a hesitation in him, small, almost invisible, but there, like a man standing at the edge of something he could not fix on his own. He did not call out to them, did not rush forward. He simply stood there for a second, then reached up to steady Clara as she climbed down, his hand firm but careful, as if even this moment needed to be handled gently. Clara stepped onto the ground and followed his gaze to the children, her breath catching just slightly as she took them in, their stillness, their distance, the way they seemed present and absent all at once, like something inside them had stepped away and never quite returned. She had seen that look before, not in children, but in people who had lost something they could not name out loud. And for the first time since the station, she understood why he had not asked who she was, because it did not matter, not here, not to them. What mattered was whether she could reach something no one else had been able to touch. And as the wind moved softly across the porch, carrying the faint scent of dry wood and fading light, Clara tightened her grip on the suitcase at her side, knowing without being told that whatever she carried inside it was about to matter more than it ever had before. Clara did not move right away, because something in the stillness of those two children felt fragile, like stepping too quickly might shatter whatever thin threads still held them to the world. The wooden boards of the porch creaked softly under a passing breeze, but they did not react, not even a glance, not even the smallest shift of attention, as if sound itself had stopped reaching them. Ethan remained a few steps behind, not leading, not explaining, just there, his presence steady but deliberately distant, like he understood this was not something he could fix by standing closer. Clara took one slow step forward, then another, the dust beneath her boots whispering with each movement, her suitcase hanging at her side, heavier now not with weight, but with purpose she had not chosen yet. She stopped at the edge of the porch, close enough to see the details others might miss, the faint crease between the older child's brows, the way the younger one's hands rested too still in their lap, fingers curled inward like they had forgotten what it meant to reach for anything. Clara lowered her gaze briefly, not out of uncertainty, but respect, the kind given to something wounded without needing to name it. Then she stepped up onto the porch, the wood giving a soft groan beneath her, and still, nothing, no movement, no acknowledgement, only the quiet presence of two lives paused somewhere between past and present. Clara set the suitcase down gently beside her, careful not to let it thud, not to break the quiet with anything sudden. She knelt slowly, bringing herself level with them, not above, not imposing, just there, within reach if they chose it. Her hands rested lightly against her knees, and for a moment she simply watched them, not searching for a reaction, not expecting one, just allowing the silence to exist without trying to fill it, because sometimes silence was not emptiness, sometimes it was something waiting. Clara inhaled softly, the scent of dry wood and sun-warmed dust settling into her lungs, and when she spoke, her voice was low, even, not directed at them as much as offered into the space between them. "It is all right if you do not speak," she said, the words slow, careful, as if they needed room to land. "Some things take longer to come back." The older child's eyes shifted, barely, not toward her, but away from the horizon, a small movement, almost invisible, but real. Clara did not react to it, did not lean in, did not change her tone. She simply let the moment pass like a breeze through open air behind her. Ethan exhaled quietly, the sound so soft it might have been imagined. Clara reached for the suitcase then, her fingers brushing over the worn leather before lifting the latch with a gentle click that seemed louder than it was. She paused for half a second, not for effect, but because she understood what came next mattered more than anything she could say. Slowly, she opened it, revealing not valuables, not secrets meant to impress, but something far simpler, something softer, stacks of folded letters, edges worn, ink faded in places, each one carrying a weight that could not be measured. Clara picked one up carefully, holding it as if it might break. her thumb tracing the crease where it had been opened and closed too many times to count. She did not look at Ethan, did not ask permission, because this was not about him anymore. It was about them, about what had been lost, and what might still be found. She unfolded the paper slowly, the faint rustle of it cutting through the quiet like the first sign of rain after a long dry season. And then, without raising her voice, without changing her pace, she began to read, not like someone performing, not like someone trying to fix something, but like someone remembering out loud, her tone steady, warm, carrying something familiar even to ears that had forgotten how to listen. And for the first time since she had stepped onto that porch, the silence shifted, not broken, not gone, but changed, like something deep beneath it had started to stir. Clara's voice did not rise or fall. It stayed steady, like someone walking a narrow path they had memorized long ago, each word placed carefully, not to impress, not to persuade, but to reach somewhere deeper than thought. The letter in her hands trembled only slightly as the dry air brushed against its fragile edges. "You always said the mornings were the hardest," she read softly, her eyes moving across the faded ink. "But that if we could just make it to the sound of birds, we would remember how to keep going." The words lingered in the quiet, not echoing, just settling, as if they belonged there, as if they had been waiting for the right moment to return. The younger child's fingers twitched, a small movement, almost uncertain, like a memory trying to surface through still water. Clara did not pause, did not look up. She kept reading, her tone unchanged, her presence steady, allowing the moment to grow on its own. "I left this letter because sometimes I do not say things out loud the way I should," she continued. "And if you ever feel alone, I want you to know that I was thinking of you even in the quiet." The older child's gaze shifted again, this time not away, but slightly downward, toward the space between them, not yet toward Clara, but no longer lost in the distance. Behind her, Ethan remained still, his weight balanced evenly, his hands resting loosely at his sides, as if even breathing too loudly might break whatever fragile thread had begun to form. Clara turned the page slowly, the faint rustle of paper marking time in a way no clock could. "There will be days when the world feels too big," she read, her voice softer now, not weaker, just closer. "But you are not meant to carry it all at once." The younger child's head tilted just a fraction, a movement so small it might have gone unnoticed if Clara had not been watching without looking, sensing without pressing. She let a breath pass through her before continuing, her words no longer just read, but felt, shaped by something she understood more deeply than she wished she did. "You can rest, even if it is only for a moment." The wind moved across the porch again, brushing against their clothes, lifting a loose strand of Clara's hair as the light shifted toward evening. And in that quiet space between sentences, something changed, not loudly, not suddenly, but enough. The older child's lips parted just slightly, no sound yet, but no longer closed against the world. Clara finished the letter without hurry, folding it carefully along its worn crease before placing it beside her, not putting it away, just letting it remain within reach. As if the story did not end when the words did, she reached into the suitcase again, her fingers brushing over the stack until she found another. But this time she did not open it right away. Instead she spoke, not reading, not performing, just offering something unguarded. She used to write these when she could not find the right moment to say them. Clara said quietly, her eyes still lowered, her voice carrying something deeper now, something closer to truth. "Sometimes people leave things behind because they believe someone will need them later." The younger child's hand moved again, this time more certain, their fingers uncurling just enough to rest flat against the wood. And though no words came, the silence was no longer empty. It was listening, and Clara, feeling that shift without needing to see it, finally lifted her gaze, not to meet their eyes, but to be present within their world, knowing without being told that this was the beginning of something that could not be forced, only followed. The quiet did not break. It deepened, like something unseen had settled between them and chosen to stay. Clara kept her movements slow, deliberate, as if each second mattered more than the last, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the open suitcase, fingers brushing the corners of letters that had outlived the voices that wrote them. She did not rush to pick another one. did not fill the silence with more words, because she understood now that what had begun was not in the letters themselves, but in the space they had opened. The older child's eyes moved again, this time not drifting, but focusing, not fully, not clearly, but enough to show that something inside had turned, just slightly, toward the sound of a world returning. Clara noticed without reacting, her breath steady, her posture unchanged. She let that moment breathe on its own, because too much attention might close it again. "You can choose which one we read next," she said quietly, her voice not asking, not expecting, just placing the option gently in front of them. The younger child's hand, still resting against the wood, shifted closer to the suitcase by less than an inch. The movement small, uncertain, but intentional. Clara lowered her gaze to follow it, not quickly, not sharply, just enough to acknowledge what had happened without making it heavier than it needed to be. She reached in and lifted a second letter, holding it where they could see it, but not opening it yet. The paper worn thinner than the first, edges softened by time. "This one feels lighter," she said, almost to herself, her tone thoughtful rather than certain, as if the weight of words could be felt without reading them. The older child blinked, slow, deliberate, their attention no longer fixed on the horizon but hovering somewhere closer. Somewhere inside the moment itself, behind Clara, Ethan shifted his stance just slightly, not stepping forward, not interrupting, but present in a way that held the edges of the scene steady, like a man who knew that this was not something he could guide, only witness. Clara unfolded the second letter, the sound softer this time, less foreign, like the porch itself had grown used to it. She began again, her voice carrying a different tone now, warmer, almost familiar. "If you are reading this, it means I did not get the chance to tell you how proud I was," she said, each word placed gently into the air, not just for the big things, but for the quiet ones no one else sees. The younger child's shoulders shifted, a breath drawn a little deeper than before, the kind of breath that fills space rather than passes through it. Clara continued, her voice steady but softer still, as if she were speaking to something fragile and real. "You do not have to be strong all the time," she read. "Sometimes just being here is enough." The older child's lips moved, barely, shaping something without sound, but no longer closed, no longer sealed away. And in that movement, in that almost word, Clara felt it, the change, subtle but undeniable, like the first ripple across still water. She did not stop reading, did not acknowledge it, because naming it might make it retreat. Instead, she let the letter carry them forward, word by word, breath by breath, until the silence itself began to feel different, no longer empty, no longer waiting, but listening. And as the last line left her lips, the younger child's hand lifted from the wood, slowly, carefully, and rested against the edge of the suitcase, not reaching inside, not yet, but close enough to say what words still could not. And Clara, seeing this without turning her head, without breaking the fragile thread that had formed, understood that something had already begun to return, not fully, not all at once, but enough to matter, enough to change everything that would come next. The moment did not announce itself. It arrived quietly, the way dawn slips across open land without asking permission. Clara kept her eyes lowered just enough to give the children space, her voice resting now, the last words of the letter still hanging gently in the air like something that had not yet decided to leave. The younger child's fingers pressed slightly against the edge of the suitcase, not gripping, not pulling, just feeling the presence of something that had already begun to matter. Clara did not move to stop it, did not guide it, because whatever came next had to belong to them, not to her. The older child inhaled slowly, the kind of breath that carries weight. And then, something shifted, small, almost invisible, but unmistakable. Their lips parted again, this time with intention, as if a word had finally found its way back after being lost for too long. No sound came yet, but the silence around them tightened, listening, waiting. Ethan, standing just beyond the doorway, straightened without realizing it, his hand brushing lightly against the frame as if grounding himself in something solid. Clara remained still, her presence steady, her hands resting calmly beside the open suitcase, her entire focus not on what might happen, but on allowing it to happen without fear. The older child's throat moved slightly, a swallow, a hesitation, and then, barely more than breath, a sound, soft, fragile, but real. Mama. The words slipped into the air like something sacred, not loud, not clear, but enough to break the long-held silence that had settled over that porch for far too long. Clara did not react, did not turn sharply or speak. She only allowed her breathing to remain even, her posture unchanged, because the moment was not hers to claim. It belonged to the child who had just found their way back to it. The younger one turned their head slightly, their eyes no longer distant, now searching, uncertain, but awake. Clara reached gently for another letter, not because she needed to, but because the rhythm mattered, the continuity of something familiar, something safe. She unfolded it slowly, the sound softer now, no longer foreign, no longer intrusive, and began again, her voice carrying warmth that did not demand attention, only offered it. "There will be times when I am not there to answer," she read, each word placed with care. "But that does not mean you are alone." The older child's gaze lifted, just slightly, not fully meeting hers, but no longer avoiding the world, and the younger one leaned a fraction closer, their hand now resting fully on the edge of the suitcase, no longer hesitant, no longer unsure. Behind them, Ethan closed his eyes briefly, just a second, as if steadying something inside himself that had been waiting for this moment without hope of seeing it. Clara continued reading, not faster, not slower, just steady, letting the words carry forward what had already begun. And as the light shifted across the porch, stretching shadows longer against the wood, the silence that once held emptiness now held something else entirely, something alive, something returning, and, though no one said it out loud, though no one moved to define it, the truth settled quietly into place, that sometimes the smallest sound is all it takes to bring a world back to life. Clara did not stop reading when the word left the child's lips. She understood something important in that moment, that stopping would make the silence return too quickly, like closing a door just as someone finally found the courage to step through it. So she continued, her voice steady, warm, carrying the next line forward as if it had always been meant to follow that single fragile word. "I hope, when you hear the wind at night, you remember I used to listen to it with you," she read softly, her eyes still lowered to the paper, not forcing connection, only allowing it to grow. The older child's gaze lifted just a little higher now, not toward her face, but toward the sound itself, as if trying to place it, to recognize something hidden inside it. The younger one leaned closer, their shoulder brushing lightly against their sibling's arm, a quiet movement, instinctive, like something inside them had remembered they were not alone. Clara turned the page slowly, her fingers careful, respectful, as if each letter carried more than ink. And perhaps it did. Perhaps it carried time, memory, the echo of a voice that had not truly left. "There are things I wish I could tell you every day," she continued, her tone softer now, almost like a whisper meant only for the space between them. "But if I cannot, I hope you will hear them anyway." The older child blinked again, slower this time, their breathing uneven but present, no longer held back, no longer hidden, and then something, small but undeniable. Their head turned, just a fraction, toward Clara, not fully, not completely, but enough to show that whatever wall had been there was no longer standing the same way. Behind them, Ethan shifted his weight, his hand tightening briefly at his side before relaxing again, as if he had been holding on to something he was finally ready to let go of. Clara felt the shift without looking, but she did not acknowledge it, because this was not about him, not yet. This moment belonged to the children, to the quiet return of something that had been gone too long. She lowered the letter gently into her lap, letting the words settle where they needed to. And for the first time since she had begun, she spoke without reading, her voice just as soft, just as steady. "Sometimes the hardest part is not remembering," she said, her gaze still calm, her presence still grounded. "It is believing that the memory still belongs to you." The younger child's hand moved again, this time not just resting against the suitcase, but pressing slightly, as if testing whether it was real, whether what it held could truly be touched. The older child's lips parted once more, a breath drawn in deeper than before, and though no new word came, the silence no longer felt empty. It felt full, like something waiting just beneath the surface, ready Almost ready, Clara reached back into the suitcase and lifted another letter, not rushing, not forcing, just continuing the rhythm she had begun, because she knew now that this was not about finding the right words. It was about giving the right ones time to return, and as the sun dipped lower beyond the fields, casting long shadows across the porch, the air itself seemed to soften, as if the world had taken a step back to make room for something fragile and important, something that could not be hurried, only honored. And in that quiet, steady space, Clara understood something she had not known when she first stepped off that train, that sometimes the ones who are left behind are the only ones who know how to guide others back. Clara let the next letter rest in her hands without opening it, because something in the air had changed again, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough that continuing too quickly might take away what was trying to surface on its own. The porch held a different kind of silence now, not the empty kind that swallows sound, but the kind that listens back. The older child's eyes moved again, this time fully away from the horizon, settling somewhere closer, somewhere real, and for the first time, they looked not at the distance, but at the space just in front of them, where Clara knelt, where the suitcase lay. Open like an invitation, the younger child shifted closer still, their shoulder pressing gently against their sibling as if remembering that closeness was allowed, as if it had always been there waiting to be found again. Clara did not rush to fill the moment. She allowed her breathing to remain slow, even, her presence steady like something the world could lean on without fear. She placed the unopened letter carefully on top of the others, not removing it, not hiding it, just letting it be part of what had already been shared, because now it was not the letters that mattered most. It was what they had awakened. "You do not have to hurry," she said quietly, her voice softer than before, as if speaking directly to something fragile and newly returned. "Some things come back slowly." The older child blinked, their gaze lifting just enough to brush past Clara's hands, not quite meeting her eyes, but no longer avoiding her presence. And then, almost without warning, their voice came. Again, clearer this time, still quiet, but no longer just breath. "She read like that," they said, the words uneven, shaped by time apart, but unmistakably real. Clara felt the shift in her chest, but she did not show it, did not react in a way that would make the moment heavier. Instead, she nodded gently, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement, as if the truth of it belonged entirely to them. "She did." Clara replied softly, not adding more, not explaining how she knew, because that would come later, when it was ready. The younger child turned their head fully now, their eyes moving from the suitcase to Clara's face, searching, uncertain, but no longer distant. And in that look there was a question, not spoken, but felt. Clara met it without pressing, her gaze calm, open, offering nothing but presence. Behind them, Ethan took a slow step forward without realizing it, stopping just at the edge of the doorway, his eyes fixed on the children, on the small, impossible moment unfolding in front of him. Clara reached slowly for the suitcase, not to close it, not to take it away, but to turn it slightly toward them, making the letters easier to reach, her movements careful, deliberate, like someone setting down something valuable within another person's grasp. The younger child's hand lifted from the edge and hovered above the letters, hesitant, trembling just slightly, as if unsure whether they were allowed to touch what had been lost. Clara did not speak, did not guide. She simply waited, and after a long second, the child's fingers lowered, brushing the topmost letter with a softness that carried more meaning than any word could hold. The older child watched, their breathing uneven but present, their eyes no longer empty. And as the last light of day stretched across the porch, painting everything in quiet gold, the truth settled deeper into the moment, that what had been broken was not gone, only waiting, and sometimes, all it takes is someone who does not turn away. The child's fingers did not pull away from the letter. They stayed there, resting against the paper as if feeling something that could not be seen. Clara watched without watching, her gaze soft, her presence steady, allowing the moment to unfold without pressure, without expectation, because she understood now that what was happening could not be guided by words alone. The older child shifted closer, just a few inches, but enough to close a distance that had been there for far too long, their eyes fixed on the letter beneath their sibling's hand, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with something quieter, something that had not been there before, recognition. The younger child's fingers curled slightly, gathering the edge of the paper between them, not taking it. Not yet, just holding it with care, as if unsure whether they were allowed to claim something that belonged to the past. Clara reached forward slowly, her movements calm, deliberate, and placed her hand gently over the stack, not to stop them, but to steady it, to make it easier. "You can read it," she said softly, her voice no louder than the wind brushing past the porch. Not a command, not a suggestion, just permission. The older child inhaled, a deeper breath this time, their shoulders rising and falling in a rhythm that had begun to return, and then, carefully, as if the act itself mattered more than the result, they reached out, their fingers touching the corner of the letter, joining their sibling's hand in that small, fragile space. Ethan stood still at the doorway, his eyes fixed on the children, on the slow, careful way they moved, as if witnessing something sacred, something he had long believed was gone. Clara eased her hand away, leaving the letters entirely within their reach, her role now no longer to lead, but to hold the space steady as they stepped into it. The younger child lifted the letter slightly, the paper bending under the gentle pressure, and together, without speaking, they brought it closer, their heads leaning in, not perfectly aligned, not practiced, but together. Clara did not speak, did not read. She let the silence remain, because now it was theirs, not empty, not waiting, but active, alive, and though no words came from them yet, their eyes moved across the page, following lines they could not fully read, but somehow understood. The older child's lips parted. Again, shaping something quietly, almost forming the sound before stopping, as if testing whether the voice would stay this time. Clara felt it in the air, the shift, the fragile return of something that had once been lost, and she stayed still, her hands resting calmly at her sides, her breathing slow, her presence unchanging, because she knew this was the moment that could not be rushed. The younger child looked up suddenly, their eyes meeting Clara's for the first time, not searching, not distant, but present, fully present. And in that look there was a question, not about the letter, not about the past, but about now, about whether it was safe to step forward. Clara met that gaze without hesitation, her expression soft, certain, offering nothing but quiet reassurance. No words, just the kind of presence that did not disappear, and after a second, the child looked back down, their fingers tightening just slightly around the paper, not afraid, not unsure, just holding on, behind them. Ethan took another slow breath, his chest rising as if something long held had finally begun to ease, and as the last light of day settled across the porch, wrapping everything in a quiet, steady glow, the truth became clear in a way no one needed to say, that sometimes healing does not arrive with answers. It begins with the courage to reach out, even when you are not sure what you will find, and the quiet understanding that someone will be there when you do. The letter remained in their hands, not fully opened, not fully read, but no longer distant, and that alone felt like something the world itself had been waiting for. Clara stayed where she was, her posture calm, her presence unchanged, because she understood that stepping in now, even with something gentle, could break the fragile rhythm that had finally begun to form. The older child's fingers adjusted slightly, holding the paper more firmly, not with fear, but with care, like something that mattered, something that belonged to them again. Their lips moved once more, this time shaping a word silently before sound followed, faint, uneven. "But there, she wrote this," they said, the voice barely above a whisper, but clear enough to carry across the quiet porch. Clara felt the weight of that moment settle into the air, not heavy, not overwhelming, but real, and she nodded slowly, her eyes still soft, still steady. "She did." She replied, her voice calm, certain, not explaining, not elaborating, just confirming what they had already begun to understand. The younger child leaned closer, their shoulder pressing fully against their sibling now, no longer hesitant, no longer unsure, and together they looked down at the page again, their eyes tracing lines that held more meaning than words alone could carry. Ethan stood at the doorway, unmoving, his gaze fixed on the scene in front of him, but something in his expression had changed. The tension that had once held his shoulders tight had eased, replaced by something quieter, something closer to relief, as if a burden he had been carrying without knowing how to name it had finally begun to lift. Clara reached gently toward the suitcase, not to close it, but to slide it just a little closer to the children, placing it within easy reach, her movements slow, deliberate, offering without asking. The younger child noticed, their hand lifting from the letter just long enough to touch the edge of the case again, this time without hesitation, without fear, as if the distance between them and what it held had already begun to disappear. The older child took a deeper breath, their chest rising and falling in a rhythm that felt more certain now, more present. And then, quietly, almost as if testing the sound itself, they spoke again. Can you read more? The words came slowly, uneven, but unmistakable, and in that moment, something shifted completely. Not just in them, but in the space around them, in the quiet that no longer held absence, but expectation. Clara did not rush to answer. She let the question settle, let it exist fully before responding, because she knew what it meant, not just the words, but the trust behind them, the willingness to reach out, to ask, to believe that something would be there in return. She picked up another letter, her fingers steady, her movements unhurried, and nodded gently. I can, she said, her voice warm, grounded, carrying no weight of obligation, only presence. And as she unfolded the paper once more, the soft rustle of it blending into the quiet evening air, the children leaned in closer, not perfectly, not fully, but enough to show that the distance that once separated them from the world had begun to close. And as Clara began to read again, her voice steady, her tone familiar, the truth settled into the moment with quiet certainty, that sometimes what is lost does not need to be found all at once. It only needs to be remembered, one word at a time. Clara unfolded the next letter with the same quiet care, but something inside her had shifted now, not uncertainty, not hesitation, but a deeper understanding of what she was truly holding, not just paper and ink, but a bridge between what had been lost and what was slowly returning. She let her fingers rest against the page for a moment before beginning, allowing the silence to settle fully around them. Because now that silence no longer resisted her voice, it welcomed it. There may come a day when you forget the sound of my voice, she read softly. Each word carried on a breath that felt steady and sure. But I hope you will remember how it made you feel. The children leaned closer without thinking, their shoulders touching, their attention no longer drifting, no longer uncertain. The older child's eyes followed the lines more carefully now, not just seeing the shape of words, but holding on to them, trying to understand, trying to remember. The younger child's hand rested fully on the letter, no longer testing, no longer unsure, simply present. Clara continued, her voice gentle, unwavering. You were never meant to carry silence as your home, she read, and something in the air shifted again, deeper this time, like a door opening somewhere inside them that had been closed too long. The older child swallowed, their throat tightening, as if holding back something that had been waiting for too long to come forward. Clara did not stop, did not soften her voice further, because she knew the words themselves needed to land as they were. You were meant to speak, even if it is only one word at a time. She finished, and the sentence lingered, not fading, not disappearing, but settling into the space between them like something that belonged there. The younger child blinked slowly, their eyes lifting from the page to Clara's face again, not searching this time, but steady, present, as if they were no longer asking if it was safe, but realizing that it was. The older child's lips parted once more, their breath uneven but real, and then, with effort, with hesitation, but with unmistakable intent, another word followed. Again, it came out softly, but stronger than before, no longer just a fragment, but a request. Clara felt something tighten in her chest, not pain, not sorrow, but something close to relief, the kind that comes when something fragile proves it can hold. She nodded gently, her movements calm, her voice returning without hesitation, because now it was not just her voice filling the silence. It was something shared, something growing. She reached for another letter, her hands steady, her pace unbroken, and as she opened it, the sound of the paper no longer felt like an interruption. It felt like a continuation, like part of a rhythm they were beginning to recognize. Ethan remained at the doorway, his posture still, but his expression changed in a way that did not need to be spoken. His eyes no longer carried the quiet fear of waiting, but something softer, something steadier, hope. And as Clara began to read again, her voice blending into the evening air, the children listened not as strangers to the sound, but as something returning to it. And in that quiet, steady moment, it became clear that what had been lost was not gone. It had only been waiting for the right voice to find its way back home. Clara's voice did not falter as she read the final lines, but something in it had softened, not from weakness, but from understanding, the kind that only comes when a story reaches the place it was always meant to arrive. The children sat closer now, their shoulders touching fully, their hands resting not just on the letters, but near each other, no longer unsure, no longer distant. And when Clara lowered the paper, letting the last words settle into the quiet evening air, she did not reach for another, because she knew this moment did not need more, it needed space. The older child kept their eyes on the page for a second longer, as if holding on to something invisible, something they were not ready to let go of again. Then slowly, carefully, they lifted their gaze, not halfway, not uncertain, but fully, meeting Clara's eyes for the first time without hesitation, without fear, and in that look there was something new, not just recognition, but presence. The younger child followed, their small hand moving from the letter to rest lightly against Clara's sleeve, not asking, not pulling, just there, a quiet connection, real and steady. Clara did not speak. She did not need to. Her hand moved gently, covering the child's for just a moment, not holding on, just acknowledging what had already been given. Behind them, Ethan stepped forward onto the porch, not quickly, not to interrupt, but because he no longer needed to stay back. Whatever distance had been there before had already been crossed. He stood beside them now, his presence no longer separate, but part of the same quiet space. His eyes moved from the children to Clara, and for a brief second, something passed between them, not spoken, not explained, just understood, gratitude without weight, trust without question. Clara reached down slowly and began to gather the letters, not closing them away, not hiding them, just placing them back into the suitcase with the same care she had taken in bringing them out. But before she closed it, the older child's voice came again, clearer now, steady in a way it had not been before. "Can you stay?" The question was simple, but it carried everything, not just the moment, but what came after it. Clara paused, her hand resting on the edge of the case, and for a moment, she looked at them, really looked, not at what had been broken, not at what had been lost, but at what was there now, something rebuilding, something real. She did not answer right away, because the answer mattered, not just to them, but to her, to the part of her that had been told she was not wanted, that she did not belong, that she should keep moving, keep leaving. But here, in this quiet place, she had not been asked to prove anything. She had not been turned away. She had simply been needed, and that changed everything. Clara closed the suitcase gently, the latch clicking into place with a soft finality. But it did not feel like an ending. It felt like something held safely for later. She looked back at the children, her expression calm, certain, and gave a small nod, not dramatic, not emphasized, just enough to answer what they had asked without making it heavier than it needed to be. The younger child's grip on her sleeve tightened slightly, not out of fear, but out of something closer to relief, and the older one exhaled slowly, their shoulders lowering as if something they had been carrying had finally been set down. The wind moved softly across the porch, carrying the last light of day with it, and for the first time, the silence that followed was not something to escape. It was something to keep, something earned, something shared. And out there, beyond the fields and the empty tracks, the world kept moving the way it always had. But here, in this small place between what was lost and what had returned, something quieter had taken root, something that did not need to be spoken to be understood, that sometimes the ones who are turned away are the ones who end up giving others a place to stay.